Hello everyone, my name is Natalia Lindstrom, and together with my colleagues Dina Kutsikuri, Miroslav Staron, Wilhelm Mading, and Ola Söder, we are going to present our paper, Understanding Matrix Team Stakeholder Communication in Agile Matrix Service Delivery. What do we know? What we know is that communication is very important in everyday life, and it also plays a key role in organizing work. We also know that managing stakeholders and team stakeholder communication can be quite challenging, but it's also pivotal to the success of an organization activities. At this moment, there are very few empirical studies which focus on developer stakeholder communication to guide the practitioners. This is what this study is about. We focus on the communication challenges that Matrix team experience when communicating with their stakeholders. Our methods and our participants. We investigated 2 organizations and conducted in total 29 semi-structured interviews and combined this data with 5 online interactive workshops. We interviewed both Matrix team members and their stakeholders.
So, Natalia, should we start talking about the results of the study?
Sounds great.
Good. So we got 4 themes, and we will now go over them so that you get an understanding what they actually consist of. So the first very strong theme that came out of the study was aligning expectations. And one question is, what are the stated and unstated expectations? So an important part in these type of complex projects is to figure that out. And if we look at it from the metrics team perspective, what we could see was that they were articulating a need for more clear communication from the stakeholders to say what they want, what they need. On the other hand, this was sometimes difficult from the stakeholders' perspective to actually be clear about what they want. And so in here between, what happens is that you have a lot of unstated expectations, so and which then really connects for the need to manage expectations. And I think that this is a kind of theme that goes into the other themes, which will be clear. Natalia.
The second challenge, which is quite common, I think, not only for Matrix team, but for all of us in daily life, is prioritizing demands. And it's an important part in Matrix teamwork and stakeholders work to get the work done. And it necessitates communicating priorities between stakeholders and Matrix team. Unfortunately, this process is quite complicated. And it's often characterized by conflicts and stress due to 3 main reasons. One of the reasons is the changes in task priorities from stakeholders that are communicated sporadically. Sometimes a team member starts working on a task and suddenly gets a note from stakeholder, please do something else. This is prioritized right now. And they just mention it as well. It needs a change. You can do it just in no time. Unfortunately, it does take time for a team member to make these changes, and it results in stress and unnecessary conflicts. The second reason is inconsistent use of multiple communication channels. We all know that today we have information overload. We use Microsoft Teams, Zoom, telephone, chat, etc. And sometimes you agree upon using certain communication channels, but people don't follow it. And this is the challenge in our project, that both stakeholders and Matrix teams seem to ignore the agreed upon communication channels. They agree upon sending a jury ticket, but stakeholders who, well, it's better I just come and talk to that person, and this person will prioritize my project. And the stakeholders feel that, well, we are asked to send a jury ticket, but the Matrix team members, they ignore it and they don't answer those tickets on time. So it results in conflict, and that you have all unnecessary stress and unclarity whether the ticket was actually taken and was acted on or not. Finally, conflicting priorities between metrics team stakeholders and management. It was especially mentioned by one of the organizations who has a newly formed metrics team, newly established metrics teams, and sometimes the priorities from management and their roadmaps conflict with the requests from stakeholders. So the metrics team members, they stand in between and don't really know, okay, how should we prioritize the request? Should we follow the management requirements or the requirements from the stakeholders, which is a big challenge.
So the third theme, and this might not be something that you feel is new, but regular feedback is of course always important in projects, but in software metrics development process with the variety of stakeholders and the complex product itself make it actually even more important. So this is about having regular status checks throughout the project, which is relating to updates, getting both information and knowledge input to improve the actual metrics, since sometimes it's not really clear about what type of metrics the stakeholder actually wants. So in a way, this is part of assuring quality in the metrics, but also that it's going to be used in the way that's intended. And all of this with very few points of feedback loops, then that actually can affect the motivation of the team members. So this has a very social, psychological impact on the team, but also on the actual outcome that the metrics will be used as intended. Right?
And finally, we talk about continuous dialogue. It's also a challenge that was mentioned by both stakeholders and metrics team members. That both stakeholders and team members consider continuous contact between them as essential for continuous stakeholder participation and reducing the feedback cycle. Metrics team members expressed a strong desire to constantly update stakeholders to make sure that they are on the right track. But they also mentioned that it was difficult to find time and arenas for discussing, for continuous updating each other on the process. And they also mentioned the obstacles to dialoguing, such as geographical dispersion, that they work in different places, sometimes in different countries, and it's difficult to find an opportunity and time to meet and to update each other. They also mentioned the challenges with time zones, language problems, as well as cultural differences, for example, in relation to presenting the problem, understanding around metrics, and also how Jira tickets are answered. So more is needed, more attention is needed to these challenges, how to manage them in practice. Yes, so as you can see, we found 4 challenges in our research, and in our paper, we relate those challenges to ISO measurement program, process model, and DevOps lifecycle, which all of you probably recognize. And here is the summary of our results. As we can see that some of the themes, theme number 1, aligning expectation, number 2, prioritizing demand, and number 3, regular feedback, they mainly relevant to such phases as prepare for measurement or plan, perform measurement or operate, evaluate measurement or deploy. And such theme as continuous dialogue is relevant throughout the process of software measurement development. So it's in our data, but we would like to mention that all those themes are actually relevant in all stages and can be important all stages. So they should be taken into account. Should, for example, aligning expectations both at the beginning, at the first meeting between matrix team and stakeholder, as well as throughout the process.
So moving on to our conclusions and guidance for practitioners. So given that we have these 4 themes that you may be quite familiar with and say, well, we already know about managing expectations. We already know that we have to increase information. Yet these are still very much challenging in different software development settings. We're still struggling to think about how can we improve communication, how can we make it more effective so that we can see the results at the end of the day in terms of better products, better processes. So to begin with, the importance of establishing a common ground with regards to what needs to be produced, what needs there are, talking about what resources do we need, do we have a schedule that we can coalesce around, and do that very early on. And I think we cannot stress this enough, can we, Natalia? It seems like usually we are ready, we want to jump into action, and we tend to forget to get ourselves aligned early on in the process. And that forces us in a way that we need to start managing expectations. And how do we do that? Managing expectations is really about communicating clarity around what we're going to do, when it's going to be delivered, and why we do it in the first place. So an exercise, for instance, to map key stakeholders is one way of actually a practical thing to do. It doesn't have to be a major exercise, but mapping out who they are, what do they want, who is in the team, and do that can really make it much easier to develop what you want to develop and lessen the stress and frustration throughout the project. And this is then also it's very helpful when you then end up having to see, okay, how do we prioritize the workloads? How do we make sure that we respond to what the stakeholders want, and we can communicate who comes first, so it doesn't just be the people who have the loudest voice get prioritized before others. So and this is the reason then regular feedback is very important, and that both the team and the stakeholders are active in this planning process, so they are agreeing on how is work actually being prioritized, and there's ways of actually also making it visible throughout the process. Moving into the general side of communication, and the need for continuous dialogue and continuous communication is to have these micro spaces built in throughout the process where team members and stakeholders can have these checkpoints to see where they are in the process, so that they can get relevant input about the project, when it's being delivered, are we getting what we want, and to also increase that the project will be successful, and even if there are problems can be resolved much more smoothly. And underlying all of this, and we know the influx of more technologies, and that we need to use technology for the benefit of the project, is actually to agree on how we're going to communicate, what technology we're going to use, and that that you stick to using them. And Natalia, do you have anything else to add in relation to these kind of guidance points?
I just would like to mention that have an open mind, listen to each other, and try to develop trust in each other at work. And communication is a powerful tool of doing it. If you manage that, you will succeed.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.